Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukha bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. May all be happy. May no one suffer from any disease. May all see only goodness everywhere. May no one suffer. This is my prayer to God. May God grant peace everywhere. He is the giver of peace. Good evening, friends. The subject of my talk this evening is Bhakti Yoga. In Vedanta or Hinduism, there are many yogas, many paths to experience God. And Bhakti Yoga is one of them. That means, Bhakti means love and devotion for someone whom you respect. That kind of love. And so Bhakti Yoga means communion with God through that kind of love. Sri Ramakrishna, who is the divine incarnation for this age, used to say, Bhakti Yoga is the best for this age. In this connection, let me tell you one incident. One of our Swamis, his name was Swami Bhaskarananda. He was a medical doctor. After finishing his education, he went to see a well-known saint of South India. His name was Maharshi Raman. And then he saluted him and sought his blessings. Then Maharshi Raman asked him, "What do you intend to do?" Then Swami Bhaskarananda said, at that time his name was Arjun, he was not a Swami. He said, "I want to join the Ramakrishna mission, Ramakrishna Order, started by Vivekananda." Hearing that, Maharshi Raman was very pleased. He said, "That's very good. In this age, it is Sri Ramakrishna who will work." And he admitted that Sri Ramakrishna was the divine incarnation for this age. So Sri Ramakrishna said that the Bhakti Yoga is the best for this age. That means the path which can help one to experience God through love. How can that be done? Well, that emotional love is abundantly present in all of us. But usually it is present in the form of self-love or selfishness. Many parents think that the babies are like angels. But truly speaking, they are not angels. They are 100% selfish. They are incapable of making any self-sacrifice. Well, how do you judge goodness? A person who is unselfish is good. A husband who willingly and lovingly makes self-sacrifice for his wife is a good husband. And who is a good wife? A good wife is she who willingly and lovingly makes self-sacrifice for her husband. Who is a good friend? A good friend is he who willingly and lovingly makes self-sacrifice for his or her friend. A good parent is he who willingly and lovingly makes self-sacrifice for his or her children. So, unselfishness, self-sacrifice, that is the criterion to judge goodness. That's why I say that the babies are not angels, because they are the most selfish. And then there are many kinds of love. And as I told you, love is abundantly present in people's hearts. There is one kind of love which is called lust. Lust is what? Lust is love for the people of the opposite sex to have sexual pleasure. That is lust. It is very selfish. That's why the scriptures of Hinduism have condemned lustfulness. Because the scriptures of Hinduism want to teach us that unselfishness is divinity. Unselfishness is divinity. Swami Vivekananda would say that many times. But this lust can be directed to God. Then that becomes bhakti or devotion. There is a story of a saint of India. His name was Tulsidas. He was a householder. He was married to a young wife. And he was also young. And he was extremely attached to his wife. And he wanted to have sense pleasure from his wife. That was the main reason, I think. And then he would not allow his wife to go anywhere. Every night he would want her to be his side, to be on his side. And then his wife wanted to see her parents, but her husband would not allow her to go to see her parents. And her parents lived close by, within walking distance from where she was living with her husband. One day when her husband went somewhere, then she quietly left her home and went to her parents' home. And the husband returned home in the evening, and his wife was not there. So on inquiry, he came to know that she was in her parents' home. So Tulsidas could not live without his wife. So he immediately walked and arrived at his in-laws' home. The in-laws were surprised to see him there because they had not invited him. But anyway, and they made arrangement for him to stay with his wife in a certain room. At night, his wife said to him, "What kind of a person are you? You can stay without me even for one evening? And without invitation you have come to my parents' home. You should be ashamed of yourself." Then she felt very embarrassed. And she said to Tulsidas, "Had you had as much attachment as you have to me, had you had that for God, then perhaps you would experience God." And suddenly Tulsidas understood something, and he left home, never to return again. He went on looking for someone who would help him to experience divinity. And then he became a monk, and all this lustfulness that he had for his wife, he was able to transform that into divine love. And he experienced divinity and became a saint. So that is Tulsidas, or Tulsidas. There is a story of another saint. She was Mirabai. She was a princess, but she did not crave the pleasures of princely life. And she turned toward God and spent her time thinking of God, loving God, and came to be known as a saint, Mirabai. She composed several songs. One of them tells us that love of God is the highest. That can help us to experience God. The song goes like this. Neet nahane se hari mile to jal jantu hoi. Said if by taking bath frequently will help a person to experience God, then I would rather be an aquatic animal. But have the aquatic animals experienced God? No. फलमूल खाकर हरी मिले तो बहादुर बदराई. There are some who think that by eating roots and fruits one will experience God. Then there are some monkeys and bats, they live on fruits and fruits, etc., eating. But have they experienced God? No. तीरन भकन से हरी मिले तो बहुत मृगी अजा. There are some who believe that eating vegetarian food will help them to experience God. That is not true, because there are so many deer and goats, they eat only grass. Have they experienced God? No. Then there are some who think that by giving up their wives they would experience God. And she said, स्त्री छोड़कर हरी मिले तो बहुत रहे खोजा. They said there are so many eunuchs, they have nothing to do with wives, but have they experienced God? At the end, Mirabai says, Mira kahe bina prem se na mile nand lala. Without love of God, one will not experience God. That's Mirabai's teaching. So through love one can experience God. So this is what Mirabai is saying. Children are sometimes very fond of their pets. When I was a boy, young boy, I had a dog. It was a very good quality dog. And I was extremely fond of that dog. And I gave the dog the name Blackie, because it was black. And then, for some reason, the dog developed some disease, and it was going to die. We tried to give medicine to the dogs and all, but that did not save the dog. The dog nevertheless died. And it was such a great shock in my boyhood, I cannot describe it in words. And for about 7 days I did not even feel like eating. Then my parents and others forced me to start eating. Such was my love for that pet. At that time I promised that never again I would have a pet. And I have kept that promise until now. So, we have love of our pets. We have love of ourselves and also the pets. Why do people have dogs as pets? Because the pet dog will always wag its tail when the owner comes to the dog. That's why nobody wants to divorce a dog. Wives are divorced in some countries because they don't say pleasant things to their husbands always. They don't go on wagging their tails like a pet dog. So, love, when it is directed to God, that becomes bhakti. And with that love, one can eventually experience God. But to practice this discipline, spiritual discipline, one needs a teacher. The teacher gives a holy name of God to the student. Such holy names in Sanskrit are called mantras. And these mantras have to be, must have the power to transform the minds of the person who will chant that mantras. And that power comes from mantras which are called siddha mantras. That is, some people have chanted that mantra and with the help of that mantra has experienced God. Such mantras are very powerful. And if one chants those mantras, then can experience God sooner. And every mantra starts with some monosyllable word like ring, cling, om. These are called bija mantras. These mantras which are given by the teacher to the student, they always start with these bija mantras. And then after that maybe then other names of divinity will be put. So in Bhakti Yoga these things are needed. And what is the requirement in order to practice this yoga? The student has to be also proper student. So he should be physically and mentally pure. It is in Sanskrit it is called shaucha. Then this student will be able to pray. That is called prarthana, pray to God. Then the students should be able to chant the holy name of God happily. It is called japa. And the student should be fond of singing the devotional songs of that is called Gita. And the student should love to adore and worship God. That is called Puja and Upasana in Sanskrit. So chanting the holy name of God is very important, because whatever thoughts we think, they get stored up in our minds. And not all thoughts that we think are holy thoughts. One of our Swamis, Swami Bhaskarananda, who was in this country, he is not alive anymore. He used to say that we fill our minds with garbage. All kinds of news. Sri Ramakrishna could not touch the newspaper. He said, these newspapers are full of lies. And journalism also is that way. Something which is attractive, they only choose that to publish. There is a saying that in order to be a journalist, when a dog bites a man, that news is no news. But when a man bites a dog, that is news. It is a little extraordinary. Anyway, but from newspapers, from TV and all those sources, people get thoughts which fill their minds like garbage. And so this mind has to be filled with the thoughts of divinity. And that's why one has to chant the holy name of God millions of times. Then those thoughts will outnumber the other thoughts which are not helpful. And then the quality of the mind will change. Then the mind will start becoming pure. And when the mind becomes almost full of these holy thoughts, that mind is a pure mind. And when the mind becomes that pure, the person with that kind of mind experiences divinity. And how the chanting of the mantra has to be done, that has been taught in Bhakti Yoga. That means this chanting which is done audibly, that is called Vachika Jopa. The person is chanting the holy name of God and others can hear it. And then the second kind of chanting is Upangshu Japa. That means the chanter only can hear. It is like whispering. Chanter only can hear that mantra, not others. And the third kind of chanting is Manasa Japa, or mental chanting, silently chanting. That is the best kind of chanting. And then also there should be between the relationship between God and the devotee, who is can be of many kinds. One is called the serene attitude, or Shanta. The mind is serene. And the other kind is that the devotee, in regard to God, has the attitude of a servant. God is the master and he or she is the servant. Then the third one is the friendly attitude. That in Sanskrit is called Sakhya. Then there is still another attitude. It is like the mother's attitude towards her child. That is called Vatsalya. Some people, they look upon God as their child. Yes. And then there is still another attitude. That is called Madhura. Madhura means it is like the love of a faithful and loving wife. A faithful and loving wife loves her husband with all her heart and soul. So also this kind of attitude one can develop. And there is another attitude which is called Santana Bhava. That means looking upon oneself as the child of God and looking upon God as either father or mother. This attitude is my attitude. I look upon God as my parent and I am God's child. Sri Ramakrishna also looked upon God as the Divine Mother. He is a devotee of the Divine Mother Kali. And in our order, we worship Sri Sharada Devi as a divine incarnation. And we call her the Holy Mother sometimes. She is the mother. And she is God's motherhood personified. And we are her children. That is the attitude of the devotees and monks of the Ramakrishna Order. So with that attitude, if one practices Bhakti Yoga, then it becomes so much easier for that person to experience divinity through this path of divine love. I have seen among our devotees and monks some people who, by practicing Bhakti Yoga, transform themselves completely. Completely. Their minds become transformed. There was one gentleman, his name was Mr. Mukherjee, he is not alive anymore, so I can name him. He used to be our next door neighbor when I was a monk in the Vedanta center in the city of Shillong. And our centers there are called ashramas. And we didn't have money, the center was financially very poor, and we used to eat very simple food, only rice and a dish made of pulses, that's all. That was our main food. Milk was scarce, we didn't have money to buy milk. But we were happy. Then that Mr. Mukherjee one day came and he was curious to know what we eat. And he saw us eating only boiled rice with pulses. Then he saw that our food was very poor. So then his wife started cooking some nice food and sent to us. That was Mr. Mukherjee. He was a kind-hearted person, and he was an officer working for some, most probably government or something. He was not anything extraordinary. Then after a few years, I was transferred to our headquarters, which is near Calcutta, and from there I was sent to America to serve the children of God in this country. And having been here, I have been invited by the Japan group of devotees to visit the Japan center. And the center grew due to my visits, so they are grateful. So one of the devotees there used to pay my fare to visit India also. So thus I could go to India a few times. And I visited Japan more than 20 times. And then during one of my visits to India, there was a Swami. His name was Krishnatmananda, otherwise known as Purno Maharaj. He was in the Shillong ashrama for a while, and he knew me very well. And as I was a young monk, he was very fond of me also. And he said to me, and he was in the headquarters, and for some reason he had come there. He said to me, "Let us go and see Mr. Mukherjee. He is in Calcutta now. He retired a few years ago and he is in Calcutta." So our headquarters is in Belur Ward, very near Calcutta. So by cab we were taken to his home. And there in his home he was the only person living there. His wife had died. And when I saw him, I could hardly recognize him as though he was a transformed person. All the time he was talking about God. He was a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, he was talking about Sri Ramakrishna. And he said that his wife, who was also a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, while dying she was chanting the holy name of God. He told us. And then he requested her to stay on, and we were there for I think for an hour or so. All the time he talked about God and God and God. I was amazed to see his transformation. It was not the same Mr. Mukherjee whom I knew while I was in Shillong many years ago. How did that happen? He was initiated by one of our presidents who had visited Shillong, and by chanting the holy name of God like a devotee, by practicing Bhakti Yoga, he became transformed like that. I will not be arranged if I know that at the time of his death, he also had the vision of God. Yes, see, Sharda Devi, the divine incarnation, used to say, if you are a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, then at the end he will surely come and take you to the domain of bliss and peace. As words cannot be other than true.